Good afternoon. Okay, folks, it's absolutely beautiful outside, and we're here on Earth Day, so I need you to try one more time. Good afternoon. Okay, let's have some enthusiasm like we're here today to talk about some important issues, which we are. Thank you to each and every one of you for coming out here today. I'm Christian Menefee. I'm the Harris County Attorney. But first, we're going to be hearing from our amazing Mayor Sylvester Turner.
Let me thank Christian Menefee, the county attorney, and doing an exceptional job. And certainly, I'm looking forward to listening to all of these panelists who are here. And let me just say good afternoon to all of you on this Earth Day weekend. Come on, give it up on Earth Day weekend. And it's good to be at the festival here, right here in Discovery Green. I think the last time we was here was two years ago, and of course last year we passed, but we are here today. And look, a lot of things have happened over the last year or so, but let me just kind of back things up a little bit to kind of set the stage for this discussion that's going to take place. In the last 5 years in the city of Houston, we have faced 4 500-year storms, flooding events in the last 5 years. And that's not counting the last Winter Storm Uri, that took place in February of this year. And what we have noticed is that these storms are coming with greater frequency, greater intensity, and they are costing all of us a lot more. The planet is getting warmer. It is an existential threat. And the question is, what are we going to do to change that? Because the reality is, even in this state, for example, when we faced the last winter storm in 2011, in the past 10 years, ERCOT, for example, the Public Utility Commission, never talked about climate change. And if you don't talk about climate change, you're not going to put in place the plans, the strategies in order to build in resiliency and to make things even better. And if you don't make the changes, then you face the same consequences over and over again. And that's what we faced in 2021, costing the state, costing people billions of dollars, and at least 125 people lost their lives to hypothermia or carbon monoxide poisoning. So you have to do things differently. For us, Hurricane Harvey, August 2017, was a game changer. It was a game changer. And it was a game changer on multiple levels. And because of that, in February of 2020, the city put in place its first ever Resilient Houston plan. And please give it up. I'm very proud of that. That was in February 2020. And then on Earth Day 2020, the city announced its first ever climate action plan. Give it up for that as well. I want to thank people like Laura Cottingham of the Office of Sustainability for being very instrumental in that. And you can't talk about these plans individually and separately. They all go hand in hand. Resiliency and climate action plan and strategies go hand in hand. And a part of that is making sure that when you're talking about resiliency, talking about climate action, that equity has to be at the front end of the equation. Because what we have noticed with all of these, let's say these 4 of 500-year storms, communities, especially those communities on the margins, are always affected. Whether you're talking about storms, whether you're talking about a winter storm, whether you're talking about the winter storm like in February of a couple of months ago, or whether you're talking about the coronavirus, all of these things have a tendency of impacting the same communities. And so with regards to the Resilient Houston Plan, 18 goals, 64 action items, and when we looked at it and studied it, we're pretty much 90% acting on all of them. With respect to the Climate Action Plan, there are 4 areas that we are focusing on because it's these 4 areas where you have the greatest greenhouse gas emission. Transportation. We know we have to address transportation concerns. Energy. We are the energy capital of the world. but we need to be leading in energy transition. That's critically important. Yeah, come on, because, and the reason why I say that, we are the energy capital of the world. To the extent we lead in energy transition, not only will it have a local impact, but it can have a worldwide impact as well. Building optimization, building energy efficiency and conservation, critically important. And then material waste management. Those are the 4 pillars of our climate action plan. Now, what are we doing about that? In July of last year, in July of 2020, we'll back up. In the climate action plan, we talked about having all of our city municipal buildings powered by renewables 100% by 2025. But I want you to know, in July of last year, we are 5 years ahead of schedule. As of July of last year, all of our city buildings are 100% powered by renewables. The city of Houston purchases more renewable power than any other city in the United States of America. We are leading the way. The plan is to plant 4.6 million trees by 2030 right here in the city of Houston. We passed an ordinance at City Council last year to incentivize the private sector in green stormwater infrastructure. And we're moving forward on that. We've talked about increasing our activity with our PACE program, building energy and efficiency. We have our 2030 plan, 30%, Councilmember Jack Christie, 30% of our private and public vehicles to be run by electricity by 2030. A part of the plan says in the energy transition that we are focusing on creating 50 new 2.0 clean tech companies in this city. And we are moving forward on that. We're working with Greentown Labs, the largest clean tech incubator on the North American continent. They will be cutting the ribbon in Houston on Earth Day this week. Things are happening on that front. We're working with the University of Houston, University of Houston Rice Management Program, with Rice University Carbon Hub Program, Houston Exponential, working with the ION, which is a resilient clean tech incubators right there at that center. There are a number of things that we're working on in the city of Houston because we recognize we can't operate like we've operated in the past and at the same time reach the agreement and the accord of the Paris Accord. Cities are leading the way. When we didn't have a federal partner in the White House, cities took the lead. Thank God now we have a partner in the White House and we can do even more and we can do it a lot quicker. And we look forward to working with the Biden administration. And then lastly, because I can go on and on, you're going to be hearing the panel talk about some of the innovations that are taking place. And I know Sandra Hines is here out of Sunnyside. In Sunnyside, there was a landfill that was opened in the 1930s, 240 acres. A lot of protests. People stood up and said no. That landfill was closed in 1970. For 50 years, that landfill has been in Sunnyside, contaminated space, holding down that community, working against people of color, low-income community people as well, holding it down. We have decided to reimagine those 240 acres. We've decided that with the modern technology and things that are in place, partnering with others, to turn those 240 acres of this landfill into the largest solar facility in the United States of America that will uplift Sunnyside. It will create green jobs, enough power to power 5,000 homes, offset 120 million pounds of carbon emission, and revitalize that community all at the same time. That's talking about equity. It's talking about inclusion. It's talking about revitalizing a community. And Sandra, it will make a huge difference in the Sunnyside community Those are the things that we need to do and do more of it. We're also in the process of hiring a climate action plan equity coordinator, which means all of us must be at the table, and everybody in our city must be able to benefit from Resilient Houston, from Climate Action Plan. Lastly, I'm pleased that a few months ago, I became the head of the U.S. Climate Mayors, 470 mayors across the country. And I will head that group. In October of last year, I became the chair of the Global Resilient Cities Network across the world in working to move that forward. And then, of course, next month, I look forward to becoming the head of the African American Mayors Association. Working with all of those organizations, working to build alignment. This is a defining moment, not just for our city, it's a defining moment for our country. The planet is getting warmer. It's up to us to do everything we can to protect it, not just for ourselves, but for generations yet to come. And we can do it, and we can lead the way from right here in the city of Houston. If the energy capital of the world can lead an energy transition, then I can assure you the positive impacts will be felt not just in the city of Houston, but it will be felt in this country and will have global ramifications. But it can start right here, working with everyone to make a difference, and I look forward to working with each and every one as we move forward. Thank you for having me. Happy Earth Day week, and enjoy it. Thank you so very much. No community is going to be left out. Not Fifth Ward, the Nickel, not Third Ward, the Trey, not Acres Home, the Fofo, not Sunnyside, not Fort Bend, not Howard Clark, not Denver Harbor. In order for us to move forward, every community needs to have a seat at the table, and every family is important in this city as far as I'm concerned. Because if one community hurts, we all hurt, and we're all in it together. I look forward to working with Sarah and all others to make a meaningful difference in the city of Houston. Thank you so very much.
It's great to see so many of you here and streaming online celebrating our planet in such an amazing green space. I'm Carolyn with Green Mountain Energy. We're the presenting sponsor of today's Earth Day event, and we've been Discovery Green's clean energy provider for the last 12 years. We've been supporting its commitment to be an environmental steward. And thanks to the park choosing 100% clean, renewable energy, it's been able to prevent 38 million pounds of CO2 from entering Earth's atmosphere. And just to put that another way, that's like taking 4,000 cars off the road for an entire year. I think that deserves a round of applause. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Christian Menefee. He is a Harris County attorney fighting for environmental justice in our area, and he is our moderator for our panel discussion, The Nexus of Energy, Climate, and Equity in Houston. Thank you.
Again, thank you all for being here. I am Christian Menefee, the Harris County Attorney, which is the Chief Civil Legal Officer for Harris County. And today we're here to talk about the nexus of energy, climate, and equity in Houston. As the mayor mentioned, we've seen several once-in-a-generation storms here in the past several years in the city of Houston and across the Gulf Coast. Scientists have made clear that because our air and our water is getting warmer, we can expect our storms to be stronger. In 2017, we saw Hurricane Harvey, which caused over $100 billion in damage here locally. But just this year, we saw one of the costliest storms in American history, Winter Storm Uri, causing over $290 billion in damage. And more importantly, people across the state of Texas, and specifically here in Harris County, languished in their homes without power, without water, freezing, many for up to 55 hours. Raise your hand if you lost power here. It's an issue that affected not just people in River Oaks, not just people in the Heights, but people in Fifth Ward and Denver Harbor and Third Ward. Every single one of us know someone who was affected by this, or we were directly affected by it ourselves. And my office is about doing the work of fighting for environmental justice. There was a manufacturing plant that opened up in the Manchester neighborhood, which is a predominantly Latino neighborhood. And they were seeking to emit hydrogen cyanide. Our office fought in a permitting challenge and got them to agree to decrease the amount of emissions for that facility by 80% of this chemical. This is the type of work that we have to do right here in Harris County and in Houston every day to make our communities safer and to ensure that our air and our water is clean. Your zip code should not dictate whether your air and your water is clean. So today we're here to talk about these issues, and more specifically about the issues that we saw with Winter Storm Uri and the nexus of climate, energy, and equity. In order to do so, we're here with a fantastic panel, which includes Deborah Nabaloga, who's at the Houston Area Research Center, Iris Gonzalez, who's at the Coalition for Environment, Equity, and Resilience here. She brought some friends with her here today, and we'll be hearing from them throughout the program, I suspect. Laura Cottingham, who's the City of Houston's Chief Sustainability Officer, and Ms. Sandra Massey Hines, who's the president of the Sunnyside Energy Trust and is also known informally as the mayor of Sunnyside. Let's give a round of applause to all of our panelists who are here today. So I'm going to introduce each of our panelists one at a time and then ask them a single question, and then from there we'll bounce around and discuss some issues through each of the panelists. I'm going to ask that you keep your remarks to a couple of minutes, understanding that we have a lot to talk about here today, but it's going to be a good discussion, so if you have something to say, make sure you get it out. First, we have Ms. Deborah Nabaloga at the Houston Area Research Center. Deborah is a clean energy policy researcher at the Houston Advanced Research Center, or HARC. Deborah graduated with a master's degree in public policy and a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science, both from the University of Houston. Her research interests include regulatory, policy, and programmatic approaches to expand clean and renewable energy resources, as well as ways to reduce climate risks for vulnerable communities and businesses. At HARC, Ms. Nabaloga is a member of the U.S. Department of Energy's Combined Heat and Power Technical Assistance Partnerships programs, providing regulatory analysis and qualitative research. She also supports ongoing work to model carbon capture and utilization sequestration regulatory trends, in addition to other projects related to energy efficiency and clean energy policy. Deborah, I'm going to start with you and with the first question. In the wake of Winter Storm Uri, what can be done to improve the resilience of infrastructure in Houston?
Thank you for that introduction, Kristen. So that's a great question. Right now, there are a lot of solutions that are available for us to be more resilient. I can speak on some that are in line with the work that we're doing at HARC. So we can use microgrids and combined heat and power to create islands of power supply that would help us out in the when we have outages, like we just had with Winter Storm Uri. And this solution can specifically be targeted to critical infrastructure to ensure that we have access to resources that we need during times of emergency, like water and telecommunications. HARC's energy team lead, Dr. Gavin Dillingham, spearheads the Combined Heat and Power Technical Assistance Partnership for the Department of Energy that helps us, that provides free of charge assistance to people who need to apply the solutions to their structures. We're also doing a project where we're investigating microgrid development in buildings. And HARC's work is not only focused on areas of resilience, but we're also working on different projects that are supposed to address the gap between the planning that's required for us to get through these severe weather events, And so by addressing what not only happened in the winter storms, we're also addressing resilience in the wake of droughts and multiple hurricanes. These are events that we can expect to increase with intensity and frequency. So we need to know how to plan to adapt to them. HARC has a couple of projects that can help with these initiatives, like the PTS project, which is aimed at helping decision makers plan for the impacts of extreme events on our power infrastructure. And the region-wide Science Information Network, which is aimed at helping communities in the Houston Galveston region understand climate risks and plan for adaptation strategies for their critical infrastructure. So also for commercial buildings and homeowners, our Energy Hub has tools that can help make structures more resilient. And we'll see that when we talk about resiliency in these communities, especially in Houston, a city that has a lot of diverse communities, while we're talking about the energy transition, we cannot leave other communities behind. So we have to ensure that we include equity goals in our climate action and resilience plans as well.
Thank you, Deborah. And you made a bunch of important points there, but the thing that really stuck with me is Houston, Harris County is an incredibly diverse area, and we're dealing with issues that we're going to see that are going to be more frequent, and they're going to be more impactful each and every time. And it's important, you made this point, it's important that no community, regardless of socioeconomic status, culture, racial ethnicity, is left behind. And so that's why I'm incredibly glad that we have Iris Gonzalez here today, because of the work that she and her amazing friends do. We're ensuring that certain communities are advocated for. Iris Gonzalez is the founding coalition director for the Coalition of Environment, Equity, and Resilience, SEER. Previously, she served as the community development officer for the Houston Office of Local Initiatives Support Corporation. Iris has also led environmental organizing efforts in predominantly Latinx neighborhoods in Milwaukee. Iris earned her bachelor's degree from Marquette University and is a graduate of the Leadership and Action Certificate Program from Rice University's Glasscock School of Continuing Studies. Iris was named one of the Houston Business Journal's Women Who Mean Business 2020 awardees. She serves on the Houston-Galveston Area Council Transportation Air Quality Subcommittee and was appointed by Harris County Judge Lena Hidalgo to serve Harris County on the Harris County Flood Resilience Community Task Force, an innovative body that gives communities of color and disinvested neighborhood leaders a seat at the table for flood mitigation issues. Iris, what success has SEER had in building relationships with communities at the front lines of the climate crisis in Houston, and what have they identified as their priorities? What do you want to see from the city moving forward?
Thank you so much, Christian. I really appreciate that introduction. And good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be with you all, and happy Earth Day week. I'm really excited to talk about the work that we have done. And when we're talking about who is at the front lines of the climate crisis in the city of Houston, there are several neighborhoods that we're talking about, and there are millions of people who are part of that discussion. And our work in SEER has really been focused on one corridor that has been hit over and over again by these climate shocks and by these disasters, and that's in Northeast Houston. And so all these folks in these orange shirts here are part of a program that SEER launched called the Climate Ambassador Program, which is really a network of residents who are living and working and serving in these communities, predominantly from Fifth Ward, Kashmere Gardens, Trinity Gardens, Denver Harbor, and the Lakewood Setagast area as well. So this work is about connecting with our communities directly and making sure that we have different messengers for this issue. And what we have found, what they have found, is that folks are really excited about talking about this, and that they understand the urgency. They understand that as our president has said, as Mayor Turner just said, this is an existential crisis. Every single one of us has lived through multiple once-in-a-lifetime events in just the past couple of years. So this is not a political conversation, this is a personal conversation, and this is very much about our survival. And so these climate ambassadors designed a climate justice survey, administered that survey to almost 600 people in those communities from those 6 different neighborhoods, and found that people are ready and to see action and to see results. And when we're talking about equity, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about influencing outcomes. We're talking about changing outcomes and getting results for our communities. And so one of the predominant things that came from that survey is that folks are very interested in how the climate crisis will impact them at home, right? Our home is our place, is our refuge. For many of our families, it's the most expensive thing that we own. It's the major source of wealth. It's the only thing we have to pass on to the next generation. And so they are interested in how we can weather the storm at home. Yes, energy efficiencies, and yes, investments in helping to reduce energy costs, but going beyond that, thinking more holistically, thinking about what we need inside the home and outside the home in order to weather this crisis. And so that is some of the work that our ambassadors are most interested in, and we've begun conversations with the city, and we very much look forward to the new position that has been created. One of the things that came from the surveys is that no one in the community knew that the city has a climate action plan. And so our neighborhoods want to see more community engagement. And so we have a lot of ideas and a lot of hopes for the new position that's been created to really engage in a robust community engagement campaign and to build real relationships with neighborhoods that are at the front lines of climate change.
So in addition to giving up for ours, let's also giving up for our climate ambassadors from SEER who are here today. Thank you all very, very much for your work on the front lines for communities all across Houston, especially on the northeast side of town. Now, as we jump from the northeast to the southeast, we're so happy to have with us here today, serving on our panel, Ms. Sandra Massey Hines, a native Houstonian and longtime member of Metropolitan CME Church. Sandra Hines is a dedicated humanitarian, civic leader, internationally recognized speaker, and advocate for the voiceless. She is the executive director of Junior Achievers Texas Youth Against Drugs and Crime and Sunnyside Silver Hair Seniors Group, a nonprofit organization involved with issues that affect youth, elderly, and underprivileged citizens. Sandra Hines is the president of Sunnyside Energy Trust, the first community-owned solar project in Houston. As you all know, the media has recognized Ms. Hines as the honorary mayor of Sunnyside. Former President George H.W. Bush nominated her for the Presidential Points of Light Award, and the Washington Times Foundation honored her as an ambassador of world peace. Her work has been entered into the National Civil Rights Museum and the Smithsonian Institute, which displayed her African kente patchwork blanket. She has made worthwhile contributions that have advanced African American literacy in the arts and literature. Ms. Hines, let's start off with you with how is the Sunnyside community impacted by climate change, and what can people do in the area to navigate these issues?
Oh, okay, great. Thank you so much. Let me extend my personal thanks to Mayor Turner, especially for his support in choosing Sunnyside as the winner of the C40 Reinventing Cities project. And this project purpose is to change the 240-acre landfill, formerly known as the dump, that has actually been closed for 30 years, as he said before, and to make it carbon positive in 5 years. Sunnyside was formerly known as Black Wall Street. And it opened in 1910 and it platted in 1912 and is located south of downtown Houston and is the largest African American community in southern Houston. Sunnyside was annexed in the mid-50s. Sunnyside was open to hundreds of businesses when it was annexed in the community due to a boom. We were basically oil and gas driven. The landfill took over the entire community with pollutants as trash and cinder mounted as high as the sky. The old incinerator polluted the complete environment in that area, as well as the entire community. The visibility was really, really bad, and the smell was even worse. It had its own water company, its own volunteer fire department, but we had a red line around the community. And so Sunnyside was prevented from actually growing as much as it could with our homes and our businesses. And the reason I wanted you to know that background is because even now, many of the citizens still living in Sunnyside find it difficult to get their homes repaired, except for those services that had been presented by our own city of Houston and our mayor. The weather recently, the Texas winter storm that occurred February the 15th, showed a lot of the weaknesses of the houses, businesses, and buildings, structures here in Houston and in Sunnyside. Even now, today, I'm still dealing with seniors who are in hotels. Many of their homes are still in disarray, with their roofs still centered in the middle of the floor. Some are being evicted, and some we've attended funerals. Anyway, our excitement about owning this historic, first of its kind, community-owned solar farm is that it will enable us to be able to create a clean environment, unlike that with fossil fuel, polluting the community, the neighborhood, as the dump did. And the solar farm will bring much needed economic development to our community. Clean, renewable energy sources, reducing the pollution that we have endured being impoverished in that community, and limiting climate change in the process. The renewable energy sources, reducing pollution and limited climate change is part of our community focus. And our vision as our board of 8 trustees, and I know that one of the trustees is out in the audience, Efren Jernigan, and his lovely wife. Our focus is community, community, community. Our preliminary design is to develop a 70-megawatt ballistic solar array that would help generate enough electricity that would supply power to thousands of residents in Sunnyside, to also provide jobs and job training to our young people who are still without jobs, still without financing, and to also assist our seniors in learning about the discounts to their lights and utilities. And also, we plan on offering training to our community, to women, to children, and also to the community at hand. And so we are a work in process. Our focus is community, 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 revitalizing our community, and just being blessed as we see it growing in the process.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. Earlier, the mayor said that as we work to strengthen our resiliency and ensure that our communities are protected and advocated for during these major weather events as we're trying to strengthen our reliance on renewable energies. There's room for everybody in this process to be a part of this fight. We've heard from folks who are on the front lines in communities, so there is room for our communities, residents, to be helpful. There's room for nonprofits in the business communities, but another important part of this process is government. And that's why we are incredibly thrilled to have Ms. Laura Cottingham here with us today on this panel. Laura is the Chief of Staff of the Administration and Regulatory Affairs Department and the Chief Sustainability Officer for the City of Houston. Previously, Laura was a member of the Hill Knowlton Strategies Houston office, providing strategic counsel on sustainability and social responsibility issues for clients across the energy sector. Laura worked in Washington, D.C., and served as the Communications Director for the Chairman of the House Natural Resources Committee, Vice Chairman of the House Transportation Committee, and Vice Chairman of the Sustainable Energy and Environmental Caucus, as well as for congressional campaigns in Colorado, West Virginia, and Texas. Laura also produced a web-based reality show for CNN and served as the government and marketing consultant for South by Southwest Interactive in Austin. Laura attended the University of Texas in Austin, where she graduated magna cum laude with degrees in history, ancient history, and classical civilizations in government. Classical civilizations, wow. In 2013, she earned an MBA in energy finance and public affairs from the University of Texas at Austin, where she co-founded the UT Energy Savings Fund. Laura, at Earth Day Houston in 2018, the mayor announced his intent to create a climate action plan. In 2019, he kicked off the public engagement process, and in 2020, he released the plan. What are the main elements of the plan, and how does it tie into energy resilience?
All right, hello. Thank you so much for that introduction. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. Thank you so much for you guys for joining. It has been quite the year. It has been quite the 2 years since we were here last time. But what is so inspiring is to see folks like you guys carrying the torch, right? The climate action plan, you heard Mayor Turner talk about it, is only successful if we have partnerships, right? That means partnerships with businesses, but it means partnerships within the community. Because what we know about Houston is that if the community doesn't take up whatever we're working on, if they don't support it, it's not going to be successful, right? It's not something that the city or any government can push forward on their own. It's not something that the business community can do. It has to have investment and partnerships within the community. And I want to take a moment to talk about those partnerships, how they're represented right now, right? So Deborah, I am thrilled to have gotten to work with when we were putting together the climate action plan. She was working on it while she was still working on her studies, and now here she is at HARC, and she is a authority and expert on this in her own, right? How the Honorable Mayor, Sandra Massey Hines, has taken us into her community. Ephraim, I see you out there, and the entire group who's working on the Sunnyside solar farm, that the city has been tackling with the solar farm, with the landfill, as I talked about, for a very long time, and we've gone through what to do for decades, long before I was at the city of Houston. And the key, the secret sauce that's making it successful now is that we have partners in the community who are not just supportive, but they're coming back and saying, no, this won't work. You need to do this, right? That it's that kind of partnership that makes what we're talking about work with. And then Iris and Sear, right? I love looking out and seeing these signs. Folks pushing the city, pushing the county to do more. Talking about climate with a microphone in Houston can be scary sometimes, right? And it's scary because it's still a very touchy subject for a lot of us in our community, and there are still some folks who do not support what we're working on. They've obviously come a long way, and you can feel it within Houston. You can feel the change, which is also so inspiring. But we need partners. We need folks who are standing up, who are coming to city council meetings, who are paying attention to what's going on in the legislature right now, saying that this is something that our community all cares about and is all partnered with. So I just wanted to say that, because that is what makes events like this so inspiring to me. And so the question was, what is the climate action plan, right? And how does it fit into this idea of energy resilience? And so, as you heard Mayor Turner talk about, the climate action plan is really half or a part of the city's response to how climate change is impacting our community. It is such a big deal, and I don't know if people understand it. I don't know if he understands it. For Mayor Turner to have been the first mayor to really step out there and tackle climate as the mayor of the city of Houston, the energy capital of the world, right? That for him to, within the past year, have released the city's first resilience strategy, as well as the first climate action plan, is really important. And so the climate action plan looks at, over the long term, what are we doing to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that we create? Spoiler alert, we create a lot of them. Looking at the different parts of our community, finding where those emissions come from and how do we reduce them. The resilience strategy looks at how are our communities impacted by climate right now? What can we do to protect our communities, to preserve our communities? And the great thing is that a lot of the things that we're working on do both, right? That we can reduce emissions and we can be resilient. And so that's why they go hand in hand together. Specifically, the Climate Action Plan has some focus areas, and they all tie into energy resilience. We look at buildings, we look at how our transportation systems work, we look at our, what we call materials management, our waste cycle, how do we build more of a circular economy, and then we look at what we call the energy transition, the power that we use, and they're all connected, right? If you don't use clean energy, then your buildings are never gonna be super efficient. But if your buildings are using a ton of energy, it's gonna put a strain on our global and our local grid, like we saw in February. Transportation, fuels have to come from somewhere, and that's a huge source of pollution. Over almost half of our emissions in Houston come from transportation. So if you see the folks over there at Evolve with all of the EVs, you really need to check that out, right? Because EVs could be a huge turning point for us in terms of air quality, in terms of public health. But they use electricity too. So imagine what would happen when everyone switches to an electric vehicle. What is that gonna mean for the grid, right? Same thing with the materials management. Houston generates a lot of waste. We are a very large city. That's why we had a landfill in Sunnyside. That's why there's gonna need to be more landfills if we don't get a hold of the waste that we generate. The Climate Action Plan calls for not only just composting and recycling, but what kind of technologies can we put out there that might use some of that waste and turn it into something else? Or better yet, how do we get to where we don't throw things away in the first place? But so specifically, I'll touch a little bit on the energy part, because I know that's kind of top of mind, and that's one of my favorite things to talk about. The Climate Action Plan's first goal in the energy section is to invest in more renewable and resilient energy, right? And yes, we are Houston. We are a fossil fuel capital. We are the energy capital of the world. But as you heard Mayor Turner say, we are also the #1 city for renewable energy in the country. And I love saying this over and over again. And what's weird is that people don't believe me. There's all these stories that will be written and people are like, really, Houston? Like, they don't think it's possible. But we moved all of our buildings to 100% renewable energy 5 years earlier than we anticipated. And we did that because the timing was right, because there's a ton of renewable energy coming to Texas right now. And in doing so, it's gonna save us $9 million a year. And I point this out because if the city of Houston can do it, than pretty much anyone can, including the county. I'm looking at you guys, right? And in any of the businesses that are in Houston, right? That we have to lead by example. And I also point that out because, as everyone now knows, ERCOT is deregulated. And so that means that we don't have as much control as a city as some other cities do. And so the city has checked that 100% renewable box. And so what do we do now, right? How can we work with the community, work with our partners to get more clean energy on the grid? And so that's where the Sunnyside project is so important, that the city is working to build a utility scale solar farm in the middle of our city. Most cities can't do that. Later this week, we're gonna have a big announcement about a new residential solar program. Depending on where you are, solar's not gonna be the solution for everything, right? I totally understand. I live in an apartment. I couldn't put solar panels on my house if I wanted to. But that's where folks like Green Mountain, the sponsor of our event, come in, right? We actually are lucky in Houston. We have a lot of different options and different ways. And I'm just pointing this out because these are all things that help us clean our grid. They reduce the emissions. They help stop that long-term climate change goal, but it also contributes to the resilience of our grid that we all know is front of mind. Our grid is super fragile, and this is a really important point in time where we're having these hard conversations to talk about how do we fix it so it works better for all of us.
Thank you, Laura. You made the very true point about how after Winter Storm Uri, ERCOT and the electrical grid are top of mind for folks across Houston, across Harris County, but even across the entire state of Texas. So Iris, given that Winter Storm Uri highlighted the vulnerability of low-income neighborhoods and communities of color, we also know that these vulnerabilities aren't unique to a winter storm. You and the folks at SEER are on the front lines of advocating against environmental inequality. Can you explain some of the systemic environmental equity issues that you and the folks at SEER are hearing from members of the community?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think that it's important to note that the climate conversation and the climate justice conversation is not separate from the environmental justice conversation. It's the same conversation. As the mayor of Sunnyside here just took us down a brief history tour, we have to understand the history, right? The conditions that we're experiencing right now, our present moment, was created by systemic choices, by systemic policy, by protocols, by practices, by decisions that humans made. Humans make up institutions. And so I think that that's important to say because sometimes our government and our leaders and our decision makers act or say that they're powerless. And actually they're very powerful, and we need them to do more, and we need them to be brave. As Laura was mentioning, talking about this in Texas still comes with some risk, right? And I think the mayor talked about how the accountability hearings for ERCOT at the state capitol, to say the words climate change out loud was not permitted in that conversation. And so it requires a level of bravery. And it requires more. But I think that the conditions that our communities experience and have been experiencing are completely connected. And we often talk about how the climate crisis is a multiplier, right, of those current conditions, of that history, and of those inequities. Whether that is the fact that you have a concrete batch plant, down the street from your house, and that's impacting your air quality. Whether that means that the drainage infrastructure in your community has not been improved upon, has not been updated or invested in. And so it doesn't take even a big storm for your neighborhood to flood. And what we saw after Winter Storm Uri is that for many of the homes in frontline communities and environmental justice communities, it wasn't just one pipe or one leak, it was the entire system that needed to be replaced. And so when we're talking about solutions and ideas like putting solar panels on homes, there are homes where first you would need to fix the roof of the home, right? You need to first retrofit and update the home so that it's ready for that solution. And so that is what we're asking for and what we're talking about when we say we want to see more. We've got to try things, as the mayor said when he was here, we've got to try things we've never done before. We've got to think about a different way of investing, and we need to really be honest about that history and that legacy and what it means in terms of us being very intentional to unravel that. Because if we're not fighting against it, then the major risk is that we will perpetuate it. It will continue on our watch, and that is unacceptable. That is not what we're all here fighting for.
Such important words. The climate change conversation is inextricably intertwined with the economic, environmental, racism conversation. And we all know that here in Houston, in one of the most diverse cities in the country, we have a ton of different communities, Deborah. We speak over 100 languages here. We have folks from all over the globe. And many of these different communities are going to have different needs. So, Deborah, how are we going to make this energy transition in a way that not only meets climate action and resilience plan goals, but also meets the needs of these different communities?
That is a great question, Christian. And like you have already said, Houston is a very diverse city, and this diversity can be seen down to the neighboring zip codes. You see huge differences in social, racial, and economic factors. And so it's important that when we're having this conversation around the energy transition, as earlier stated, that we include equity goals in here to ensure that we're not creating a system where we're having people leaving people behind, and only those who can afford clean and green energy are the ones with access to it. So you'll see in Houston electric costs for low income residents are a huge burden. 6% of for many people, 6% of their total income does go to their electric bills, which these same people are subjected to long power outages during flooding and other events like that. And so it's important that we ensure that these people are not left out when we're having these green sun events, which are like the extreme climate events. And initiatives like energy storage would help with the resilience for communities and people's homes in such times of emergencies. At HARC, we're working on an initiative with the Department of Energy called Powered for Good that is expanding solar and storage to lower income communities and people who would otherwise not have access to it because of resources in Texas's deregulated electric market. And so initiatives like this help the communities and people prepare for resilience in times of these very extreme weather events.
Thank you, Deborah. And Ms. Hines, I'm going to let you bring us home as we wrap up here today. Our conversation has largely been centered around what businesses can do, what communities can do, what government can do. And we've talked a lot about these underrepresented communities, these environmental justice communities, these communities who more often than not don't have the resources to fight for themselves. So, Ms. Hines, Mayor Hines, what do you say to the folks out in Sunnyside who are dealing with climate change and who are wondering how they can be a part of the process or what's being done for them to aid in these issues?
Okay, thank you again. What can the people in our communities do? Well, let me just share something else with you. This Sunnyside Energy Project, it began as a core collaboration input first between Wolf Energy and South Union Community Development Corporation, CDC, that won the International C40 Reinventing Cities competition in August 2019. And so we see that it is being received as not only the nation's largest urban solar forum, but also around the world. And I just wanted to mention that. But some things that we can do and the community can do is to begin to educate themselves. We're putting together some programs to educate the community at hand. Number one, regarding the solar, the reduction of their utilities, how the climate change affects the environment. We should invest more into renewable ways of power generation. I believe that the grids that we are using now were put in half a century ago, and none of those have at this time been restructured. Nothing has been done to replace them. And so the community can get involved by learning about these projects that are coming up, the solar and how it's going to be advantageous for them, how the growing of the aquaponics and agri-hub vegetables and fish and different things off the ground as opposed to in the ground would be able to help them. And they should also want to learn about the sustainability techniques that are going to be used in reducing carbon impact in our communities.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hines. As we wrap up here today, folks, what I took from this conversation is that we have dealt with major storms here, a major winter storm just this year, various crises that affect our ability to increase resiliency and our reliance on the type of energy that's going to be clean. But every single day we have people who are in the government offices, on the front lines, in the classrooms, doing the important work of engaging on these issues and being advocates. So I want to say thank you to all of our panelists, Deborah, Iris, Sandra, and Laura. Thank you all so much for being here today. Thank you to Green Mountain Energy for putting on this panel. And most of all, thank you to all of you who are out here on this beautiful Earth Day. It was a little bit more beautiful. I'm getting a little chilly now. But thank you all for being out here today. I look forward to continuing this conversation. And I'm just very grateful for the work of everybody who is leading in this fight. Thank you.
Laura, you did good.